All
wonder
right,
if they can
let's
hear
start
us.
this again. We are live. This is Jeff Talks RPGs, and I am here with Jim Davis, Jonathan Pruitt of the WebDM show. And guys, thank you for being here. It's amazing having you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for
And
having us.
we're going to get to this later, but just want a quick shout out to your Kickstarter, Weird Wastelands. You are 1,200% funded, a goal of $18,500, and you are at almost $250,000 on the funding. Amazing.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we've kind of gone past what my expectation, like my pie in the sky, like, oh, it'd be great if we got to that, and we're kind of like looking back at that, like I don't know what to do right now.
Yeah, you're
So
at the funding level I wish I had on my Kickstarter because then,
Yeah.
I could be doing all this full time. But amazing job.
Thank
2C
you. Thank you.
Gaming and your collaboration with them just knocked it out of the park. So
Yeah.
fantastic.
thank
But
you.
we are here today to talk to Jim Davis and Jonathan Pruitt about DM tips and preparation tips. Uh, first of all, Jim, could you introduce yourself and maybe kind of give a shout out to where you can be found on social media?
Yeah. So I am Jim Davis, one of the hosts and founder of WebDM, creative director, do all kinds of stuff. I am on Twitter intermittently, not often, but sometimes you can find me at the real Jim Davis. But for the most part, you can find me every week chatting it up with my other host Pruitt, who is my partner in crime every Wednesday on our YouTube channel. And as well, some of the games that I've DM'd on our second YouTube channel, WebDM Plays, which is where the Land Between Two Rivers is now housed, which sort of serves as the inspiration for the Kickstarter.
Yeah, and I'm Pruitt. I'm the other half of WebDM, of course. You can find me at jpruinc on that's on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, like most social media. Yeah, and it's really awesome to be here tonight.
So really quick, just tell me how the show started. How did you guys come
Uh,
up with the idea for the show?
so the show started. Our other the other co-creator, Travis Bowles, and our former producer. Um, we were cohabitating at the time. It was me and him and his wife down in Austin, Texas, and he's done production his whole life, and he really wanted to do a YouTube show. And he's like, we need to figure out something to, I just have these cameras, I have all this equipment, I just want to point it at something and shoot it and put it on the internet. And so, we'd been thinking of ideas for a few weeks, and I was driving home and I called Jim Davis because we were about to play D&D the next day or sometime soon, and I had a question about a character option or ability or something, and got off the phone with him and was just kind of like, man, that's awesome. It's kind of cool. As a preface, I was a pharmacy tech for 20 years up until last December. So, I'm in the medical field. And so in my head, as I'm driving, I'm like, oh, it's awesome. It's just awesome to have Jim just on call. Just if you need something, you can just figure out what it is. It's kind of like WebMD. He's my web DM. And like that thought process took about 5 seconds. And I almost had a wreck when the epiphany struck. And I might have broken a few laws getting home faster, maybe only by 45 seconds, but who knows? Busted in the room, was like, Travis, web DM. And he kind of looked at me, he's like, web DM? You mean web DM? And I was like, no, web DM. And he goes, and then it was just convincing Jim, which we did over drinks for us at least, at a Mulligan Christmas party, which is our group of friends used to have every year as an annual tradition to, after all the family stuff's done, let's get together and just have fun. And that was our Mulligan Christmas. And we pretty much cornered Jim and were like, we want to put you on the internet. And Jim was very like, I don't know why people would want to listen to me. And I'm like, Jim, how much do I listen to? I listen all the time. And so that's kind of how it started, just like that player DM relationship, which is what we try to portray. If you look at our set, Jim's behind the screen, I'm over here with the books, and that was kind of the setup. But that's the show.
Well, it's an amazing show. I've seen before. I haven't watched the show a lot, but I've started to watch it ever since we started talking and set up this interview. And the show is amazing. You've got like
Thank you.
275,000 subscribers or something like that, I think. And you get tons of likes on everything you show out there. And if and the people who are listening or watching this show now, do yourself a favor, go out and Google WebDM and check out their YouTubes. They've got some great um, sit down discussions about session zeros and tips for new DMs, which is what we're going to talk about today, is just preparation tips for DMs. But yeah, I highly recommend the show. It's been a lot of fun just watching and catching up with you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
So when we get to DM tips, some of the things that when I first started DMing is I prepped a lot. So I made sure I had what I was going to say written down, and descriptions and all that kind of stuff. This is for a home
Mm.
campaign.
Hey
I
there,
hadn't
witches
run
and warlocks. I'm
a
Pruitt.
structured
This is Jim
official
Davis. And
WotC
as the
book or third party
old
book at the
spell
time.
says,
Yeah.
double
Um,
double is 5.
And so, a lot of times that worked out where my players did what they were supposed to do, but sometimes it didn't work out. So what do you suggest as a home campaign? Let's talk about home campaigns first. What kind of preparation do you suggest, or do you think is good for a home campaign session? Let's say like a 2 to 4 hour session where you're get together on the weekend or on the internet, and you're going to run your players through a certain section of your home campaign.
Yeah, yeah. I know for me, like the big question is like, is it a one shot? Like, is this a one off kind of thing, or is it part of an ongoing, or just our next session? Because that really influences a lot of how I would look at that. If it's an ongoing campaign, most of my prep I do like immediately after the last session, and as well, it's still fresh in my mind. The events have happened, and so prepping for the session sort of to be. I mostly just look at the situation as when we last left it. Is there any way that the world can react to it? Any NPCs who might be in a position to take advantage of something that happened, or who would be impacted by it and have a response? Is there any consequences that we haven't resolved, from prior sessions of play that we need to? And really, usually that's enough. Like for a game that's like got a full head of steam and is going, and you're in that like chain of consequences sort of race that D&D can sometimes become. It kind of takes care of itself. But if I do need something, I look to tools that I will have created for myself at the beginning of the campaign to spark my imagination and keep me within the thematic bounds of whatever it is that I'm running. If it's a published adventure, that's usually like maybe an encounter table or something that I'll roll on and let it sit in my mind and sort of think about it. Um, but for the most part, what I'm doing in all of this is just preparing like a palette of things that I would like to happen if the opportunity arises, but that otherwise we're going to start the game, and like the ball's in the player's court. I'll respond to them. I'm comfortable enough with my experience and just sort of DMing style that I'll be able to deliver a satisfying session from that setup, with the occasional like set piece if need be.
Right. Yeah, being in your own world, you kind of have an idea of what's going on around the characters.
Yeah, yeah. And it's
Yeah,
really why like developing your own homebrew that you like to spend a lot of time in and can use from campaign to campaign to campaign. Like the longer you use it, the easier it is to just like stop what you're doing and run a game in it.
right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, because you're thinking about it at work.
Yeah.
You may be at the day job, but you're thinking about,
Yep.
well, if this happens in this town, or these guys do
Mhm.
this, or they meet up this, oh, this is a great NPC, let's meet up with them, or put them
Yeah.
in the background and have them come across. And probably some of the best sessions I've ever run as a DM have been when they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. For me,
Everything at that time is just off the cuff reactions to what they're doing, and it turns into a lot more role play, I think, than it does combat encounters and that type of thing.
yeah, I found that about a once every 2 to 3 sessions there'd be a combat as it arises from the conflict of the events of play. Like I always felt like forcing a combat, even like as long as I've been DMing, just felt weird. It was just like perfunctory
Right.
and the like. And so I wanted the conflicts to arise because like, well, you guys took too long and got discovered, or they're after you, or you upset someone else and they've sent someone, like when it feels good, is how I try to look at it. And I just keep my eye out for when those might be, and throw NPCs with perpendicular agendas to the party in their way all the time, so that there's bound to something's going to happen.
Right.
If you throw dynamite at something long enough, it'll set fire.
So when you're prepping your home campaign, you've got an idea of what you want to happen in your head. Do you outline, just make little notes, or do you go into an in-depth description of what you want your session to have happen?
So usually, if it's a long-term campaign, at the start of it, I will have prepped a series of like idea generators, encounter tables, just stuff that I'd like to include. And I'll try to go back frequently to that, if only to just sort of refresh my understanding of what I would have liked out of the campaign when it was in the beginning. But for the most part, I keep track of it on a what I've heard described as a Kanban board or a Kanban board, or like for organizing work tasks at a Japanese factory of like it's spatial, sort of visual. I have it set up in a spreadsheet. It's like color coded boxes, and it's like Goblin Chief that PC's upset, or Witch who owes them a favor. And reading it left to right, there's like 7 categories, and the closest it is to the left. Thank you. Is how it's going to be used in the game. So the leftmost column is I'm using it in the session that night. We're going to resolve it tonight. And then the further to the right you get, the more in the background it is. And you wait for the PCs to let you know of all the things you've introduced or that they have suggested, which ones they're interested in pursuing, and that's when you move it to closer to the left. And it's sort of intuitive in some sense. I don't have a hard and fast rule for how things get moved around or when they're introduced. But if a player says like, I'd like to go to this place, or I wish we could talk to this person, it's going on there. And if they never bring it up again, it'll slowly make its way to the rightmost column and I can drop it, or it sticks towards the left and I use it continuously until it goes in the finished file.
That's that's a great way to track that.
Yeah, it's just little notes. And then underneath that, I usually keep like a list of names, a list of places, magic items I want to use, things like that.
Do you use voices?
If the mood strikes me.
My whole issue is when I use voices is trying to remember that voice when I come back to that NPC later. It's like,
for real, yeah.
I have no idea.
Pruitt has a much better system for this than I do for voices. But
so Pruitt, do you use voices?
Yeah, I have a tendency to throw in voices here and there. I do a decent Sean Connery and Jimmy Stewart and that kind of stuff. So when they run into the mayor of the town that's exasperated, going, well, I don't know what's going on over here. I find that like if you can use a voice like that, they will gravitate towards it. So
I agree.
But it doesn't have to be like an impression. But when you like in my Spelljammer campaign, I put a beholder as a bartender, like who's there, neutral character, neutral NPC, and it's Sean Connery's voice coming out of a beholder who's a bartender. And so they love that guy. And so I found that was a trick that I learned. And then in my home games, I just started realizing, and this is something I tell people now all the time because of my, was running a sci-fi cipher game, and I introduced a few characters that were NPCs, but they were PCs that I had played in the past, and all I did was basically just like remove where they were from and put them in the sci-fi game, but the same essence, the same motivations, things like that, because you could easily draw on that, because if you play a character for long enough, you just kind of know how that character reacts to situations, and thus it seems more natural. So I highly recommend it. Don't do it too much because you use up all your characters, and then all of a sudden your players are just waiting for that one character to show back up. It's like, oh, that's the Russian guy, and so that's something that I do for characters. But I usually, like when I'm gaming, I have this like whiteboard like that I use, and I will write like NPCs and just little notes about them, like gruff, or I usually just try to use one adjective as their voice, nasally, gruff, speak slow, because usually that's enough to just kind of get my mind back into, oh yeah, that's how that NPC talked.
Yeah, that's a great tip to just
Mhm.
make a single word, or even like I think Sean Connery would work, for your beholder. But you probably know that voice now. We see your
Most
your
certainly
beholder.
does. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I've
Fantastic.
done
Yeah.
that I played a dwarf that did that, and that was a fun campaign.
Yeah. One of my
But
NPCs
yeah.
had a Harry Carey voice. I don't know if you know who Harry Carey is.
Oh yeah.
Back in the day when he was the voice of the Chicago Cubs.
Oh yeah.
Just one of those voices you can never forget. And then my current character that I'm playing is Warfist. He's a Goliath, and he kind of has a Arnold Schwarzenegger's type voice to him, and so it's
It's
um,
out.
yep,
Yeah. Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. Those are fun. Like that to me,
Voices are
but
fun.
that's like, I'm not trying to be, like it's not really like a Matt Colville effect, or excuse me, a Matt Mercer effect
Right.
for me. Like, I'm not trying to be like a dramatic voice actor. I do it because it's funny and fun. And
That's why I do
usually,
it too.
yeah, it makes people smile and laugh, and just we have a little fun. And then we can have some more serious moments. But then you come out of it and there's that voice and everybody kind of laughs again. I don't know. It's just, you know, but as far as DM prep though, like I know what you mean about over prepping. That's how I used to be. But 6 years at the feet of the master have taught me various ways. And like, random tables are amazing. I ran a cipher game, a sci-fi cipher game on our stream called Breath of the Fall, and that entire game, I made 3d6 nested tables and put entries for each, and just rolled before the adventure, and that was what populated the next section of where they were going. And so it was all just randomly generated. Then I would just kind of knit together a story based off of that, and that's just the next section of where they're going. Environmental hazards, people and places, and then like technological hazards, things like that.
So let's break that down. So you've got an encounter table. What's on that encounter table then? How many rows is it? How many columns? Does it include? What's it start with? A monster, a creature, or just like a scenario? Or
well, that particular table, I'm trying to bring it up. There it is. I don't mind sharing this with y'all. It's not completed because it didn't really need to be, but like the first section is all, I called it Sentient Encounters. And so examples of this are just like team members of like an expedition that nobody really knows about, but is important to the story, like cyborgs, mutants, wastelanders, pirates. And on the other half of the 3d6 table, since it is a bell curve, is all of the locations that those people might be at, because that was a way of just like either they find the people or they find the location that the people are at. So it's just kind of like, do you find them at their base or not? But it's a way to limit your choices, or at least I found it was a way to limit my choices. I didn't need to come up with a bunch of things. I just needed to come up with 9 things.
And so by using that table, based on the role, it kind of builds onto your story too, because you don't know where those people are, right? Necessarily.
Exactly. No, because quick capsule, the whole thing took place technically in a tube. Like, it was inspired by the Abyss and Alita Battle Angel. So they were literally in a city that was hanging from like a mesh netting. Basically, it was a HEPA filter, and inside of a giant air shaft tube, like I think it was like 16 kilometers in diameter. Like, that's how big this tube was, and that was where they lived. That was the environment. And so the whole campaign, they were going down because nobody was allowed to go down. And so, but they had to for reasons. And so this was them discovering the unknown. And, like I said, there, I'll share that in the doc there, or in the chat for y'all, so you can just kind of look at it. But the thing is each entry then had a D6 table with like 3 rows. So like, you find the cannibals, and the first row is how many cannibals do you find, and there's a table for that. And then there's what are they doing? Are they hunting dinner, capturing dinner, preparing dinner, tanning hides, crafting scrimshaw, or are they eating dinner? Like, what activity do you catch them in when you come upon them, and in what condition are they in? Are they starving, diseased, exhausted, mutated, sated, or injured? Because if you come across some cannibals that are carving scrimshaw and they're sated, they might not reveal that they're cannibals to you, and they might just let you go by, right? Like, so that was the way I prepared it in advance. Like, okay, I know what these people are doing. I know how many are there, all that. And so when they come upon them, I'll roll on my reaction table, because WebDM is a big proponent of reaction tables. And so, you roll on your reaction table and it's like, yeah, they want to talk or they don't. And so that it was an amazing campaign. Like, I was continually like, I was never wanting for like things to give the party. Like, if you look through that document that I shared with you, like, it's not finished at all, because I didn't really have to, because I only filled in the parts that I needed after
you
a
could
while.
probably get 2 or 3 years of solid gaming just out of that thing.
That's pretty cool.
And so, yeah, it was just an idea, because I wanted to quit over prepping. This was me going like, I'm going to do this specifically. But what it did give me, and what came out of this, is I'm not as elaborate as Jim with my notes and everything. I just usually use a Google Doc with, these are my NPCs, these are, and what they want. And then these are the plot threads that I'm starting with. And then if the players pick up on it, then in the player notes, I'll bring that plot thread down. And then I'll have a section that's like hanging threads at the end of each section that stays at the bottom, right? So like, each time an adventure happens and I write my notes, the hanging threads are always at the bottom, so that they're always right there and I can see what they have left to do. So like, that's kind of how I organize my like after session notes, which when you're running a table, something like this, like, I literally would just roll stuff up. I'd write down what I got, and then I would come up with maybe an NPC or whatever for it. But after that, like, it was whatever they did, and I had to write notes as I was DMing or right after, so I could keep a memory of like everything that happened in the interactions and the reactions and so on and so forth.
Yeah, for a new DM starting their own home campaign, I could see where this could be really useful. Just building this random set of encounters based on your world, and that's pretty cool.
And it was all and I made it very self-referential. When you look at mutated things, what does that mean? Well, here's mutant. You go up there, and then you can actually see like, how did they become mutated? Like, there were things that reinforced kind of the narrative.
So that's for a home campaign. What about have either of you run a written adventure before?
Oh yeah.
Well, I'll say very quickly, I've only tried once and it failed horribly. It was the first 5e one. It was my first attempt to try to do that, and I just became overwhelmed very quickly and handed it over to Jim as I handed over to Jim.
Yeah, I've run them quite a bit, both in 5th edition and other systems. Started out, first few campaigns I did were pre-made modules. Back when it was like, this is supposed to be for a couple sessions adventure as opposed to like a whole campaign,
right.
And I find that I find them way more prep intensive than a home game, at least until I've internalized the module and sort of made it my own. But I usually do that by like just taking it apart, and looking at what's presented in the book as they're trying to get me this information that's in the designer's head, and like they've got to include a lot of stuff and account for a lot of things I might not need. So it's my job to go in there and like pick out what I know I'll need, separate that out, make it easier to access, make sure I understand where other information is in case I need it. And then I really, what I do is I create my own play materials, like cheat sheets and maps. And, I might, if there's a dungeon or something, for instance, in the adventure, I'll redraw it on just blank paper, no grid or anything, just the outline of the rooms, and then write over it what's in what room, where are the traps, what are some descriptive text I can use to bring this place to life, and try to cram as much of it as I can on 1 or 2 pieces of paper that I can just have in front of me, as opposed to flipping around a book or something like that. Consequently, most of my favorite supplements have that sort of feature to them, including the one that had a table similar to what Brew was talking about in his, and showed us where it was a hex crawl, 25 hexes, each hex has 3 things already in it, and you sort of open up a page to the book, and it shows you that hex, what's in it, the neighboring hexes, and it's able to like facilitate a very detailed exploration game because they've gone to the trouble of like really zooming in and the like. So um, that running something out of that is much different than say a like a adventure path style or narrative
Right.
adventure.
So for an official campaign or a third party book, do you read it cover to cover first, or do you just start breaking it down?
As much as I can. I will peter out probably somewhere towards the end just because I'm there's so many ideas that not to act on them and start prepping for them, get impatient. But I try to read at least the first half of it as far as I could, can guess, and go through it. And then as the sessions come up or as I need refresher to return to it over and over again and read and read and reread and take notes. And they usually end up marked up and you know, notes
Yeah.
pasted all in them and
Right.
all that kind
Which
of
is
stuff.
okay.
Yeah,
If
it's
you're
perfect.
it's your book, you can mark it up,
Yeah.
highlight, add tabs to it, and that's it. Just don't dog ear. Add little tabs to it or something like that,
Yeah,
sticky
yeah.
notes or something. Just don't dog ear it. I'm sorry. Um, so what about prepping for live games versus virtual games? Is there any difference in that kind of preparation? This is a question from Alan Tucker.
Ooh,
Big time, big
yeah,
time.
yeah. Why don't you go? This is
What
go for it.
what I learned fairly quickly in my Starbound campaign, because I'd played in many campaigns like over on Counter Role Play back when what it was called, um, and yeah, I wasn't really paying attention at first, but once I started actually DMing, here's the thing: you might get 3 to 4 scenes, maybe, in a streamed game. And that's if it's like a 3 hour game. You might get 3 to 4 scenes, like full scenes. And so just remember that, like don't prep like a whole thing. You're not going to use it. Like in the beginning, I was, since I had already run a Spelljammer inspired campaign in our home group. It was like the first campaign I'd ever actually run start to finish. And like Jim was saying earlier, you got to find the world you want to jam in. And then, you can go spell jam, and that was for
Yeah.
me. So doing Starbound, I already had a lot of notes for that. So it was more about just kind of crafting it for the characters I had. And so I did all this prep. And the first adventure, like we had to do like a cliffhanger because like we weren't even done with the first adventure. And I thought like, oh, we can do this and then maybe get to that, and then it was about 6, 8 episodes that I started to realize I was like, all right, I'm just going to prep like 4 things, and that started to be enough pretty much.
Yeah.
Like I sometimes prep 5 or 6 little bits here and there, but yeah, 3 to 4 usually, like one for each character.
Online play, I find it slows down because you've got to wait for the other person to finish talking. Whereas when you're in a group, you can all kind of talk and one can talk over the other. Whereas when you're
Mhm.
on mics and headphones, it's really hard to
Mhm.
to let that. So you want to let the other person finish talking. And
Yeah.
then combat's a little slower too, because if you're doing virtual dice, sometimes those are a little slow. It just seems to keep live play is much quicker, I think.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
it's it's definitely different, and even like online is different. Like, are you playing a private game just online, or is it a streamed game of some kind? Like,
Right.
I find the private games that I play online, there's just as much tendency to sort of like wander off topic or spend a lot of time just sort of chatting and sort of table talk, but harder to get the momentum out of that
Hmm.
going as opposed to a live game where it's like, it's a live game, I'm going to stand up. All right, we're about ready. There's visual cues,
Right.
at least I could rely on. So whereas a streamed game, everybody's usually pretty focused and intent on it, and
Mhm.
therefore, like a 2-hour game of that is usually plenty for
Mhm.
me. Like I'm usually kind of burned out by the end of one of those. But
Right.
also, like 3 or 4 hour private online game, whether I'm a DM or a player, I'm usually more afraid and just kind of worn as opposed to an in-person game, and I think that's because of the sort of
Excuse me.
limited sitting down. And so what I would do is account for that. You're sitting down, the pacing we've said can be slow. So like account for it, make sure that you've got those scenes or whatever that you want to use in the game or whatever you've prepared, that it's high energy, demands the attention of the players, and that it engages them, that it's something they're interested in and have responded to in the past, and kind of like focus on that to keep that pace and momentum going, I'd say.
My brother's running Tyranny of the Dragons for us
Oh yeah.
on virtual due to COVID. We all just went to online play once a week for 2 hours a night, and
Yeah.
he's done a really good job of doing it, of converting into virtual versus
There you go.
in live play. And we ended up buying the Roll20 module so that we could have the maps and the tokens and all that kind of stuff. That helped
Oh
a
yeah,
lot.
yeah.
He,
That
he
helps a
said that
lot.
really
Yeah.
helped a lot too.
I
But
bet.
yeah,
Yeah.
gotta give him kudos for that because that's a big change.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's not an easy module to get to. There's a lot that you gotta like kind of shift around and do for yourself. So it's I ended up enjoying it. That's the one that I took over from Pruitt when he was
Yeah,
after
Yeah.
it's
like the
been
third
fun.
session. Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
almost done. We're almost done. He
Yeah.
keeps saying we're almost done, but we keep going.
It's called to the dragon. There's no end. There's like
Right.
Yeah.
right.
There's always
Yeah.
another color of dragon.
There's always another Dracolich. Oh
We
god.
had our session 0 for we're getting ready to play Ryan with the Frost Maiden, and one of the other
Yeah.
guys is DMing for us, and we had our session 0 last night, and somebody was like, "Can somebody like take better notes because we've been playing Tyranny of Dragons, and we were assigned this task by somebody, and we meet him later, and he's like, okay, give me the dragon mask." And we're like, no, who are you? And
Yeah.
we
Oh
finally
yeah.
found out, oh no, he's the guy who gave us the quest. We're supposed to give him the mask. So it's the whole note taking
Yeah.
thing,
You
virtual
just
One
did all
wise,
this work for this mask. I'm gonna give it to you.
yeah,
right?
yeah,
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 we want it.
yeah.
Why do you want it?
Yeah, yeah. If it's been more than 4 sessions since you've introduced an NPC, it's time for a flashback.
Yeah, yep. And real quick, from these preparations and everything, what happens if you find that your combat is either overpowered or underpowered for your playing group, your characters, and your players?
Mhm.
I don't mind an easy combat every once in a while, but if they're
Mhm.
constantly running through the combats, it makes it a little boring, I think,
Oh yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. It does. Yeah,
And then you don't
variety
want
is
to
the
kill them every time either.
right. Yeah, variety is what you're going for. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's a nail biter. um like as long as it's varied up, I find, as well as like sometimes there's no fight or sometimes they run away or
Hmm.
so. What I like to do is make my adjustments grounded in the fiction of the world. So like there's a lot of DMs who will fudge a die roll or change up hit points, and I'm not gonna cast shade on them. You run your game the way you want to and the way your group enjoys. you know for me, I like to ground those things in the fiction. And so if I am going to make a change in a monster stat or in the conditions of the combat to adjust the difficulty, I want to make sure that it's telegraphed through. You hear the sound of footsteps as another wave arrives. Next round they'll be joining because the combat's too easy, and I'm going to bring in some heavy hitters. Or you look like they're wavering, like on paper it's a nail biter, but they don't think that. One more round, like one more good attack, one more, press home your advantage, and you think you could cause them to run. And to telegraph those things and ground them in like the actions of the NPCs and the monsters and things like that, spell effects, sudden rituals, weird omens. It's fantasy. You can use that as an excuse for all kinds of reasons to
Yeah,
change the conditions of combat, to adjust the difficulty. And I like doing it in the open like that because I never felt right changing things behind the screen without telling the players. Like I don't know where it comes from in me. I like rolling
I
my dice in
I
the open.
understand.
Yeah, and I certainly see it as the DM's prerogative to do those things, but I didn't want to just do them because like, oh, I'm not having a good time. Like unless they're clearly bored, stacking dice, wandering away from the table, grousing, like they could be really enjoying themselves in something that I think is a cakewalk.
Right.
And by grounding it in the fiction, I'm able to telegraph it. They're able to respond to it through their characters. That just makes for a more satisfying experience, I find.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like that.
You know,
I like that.
and it's fun when your monsters don't all fight to the death. Like when sometimes they've just had enough. And that ogre's like, yeah, you just dealt more than half my hit points of damage. I throw down my club and beg for mercy, or walk away, or I'm going to give you all my half of my treasure if you let me live. It's And then you meet him later, a few sessions later, and remembers it. It makes for a more living and enjoyable world, I find, when there's more outcomes than just like to the death blood fest.
So we're about at the halfway point here. I just want to give a quick shout out to Jenny Loveday. She is in the background here taking care of everything. This is her Twitch channel. So if you would just subscribe, like, share, just let people know about it. Also, this is in podcast form now. It is on Spotify. I think any of the podcasts, Apple Podcasts. You can find us also on YouTube. Go out there, like it, share it, rate it. Give me some ratings. Let people know that this is a good show. Jenny does a
Yep.
great job behind the scenes. So yeah, if you would just give her a
Work
little
that
subscribe
algorithm.
there or a follow or something, greatly appreciate that. One more quick question before we get on to talking to your Kickstarter. Der Viking Tron, my monsters and NPCs oftentimes retreat when they lose morale, but my players always chase them down and kill them anyway. I often wonder if I'm wasting my brain juice on those kinds of decisions. Do you think I should just have them all fight to the death anyway? I say no.
No,
They're gonna,
no,
they're gonna run.
no. And this is what you do. And maybe this is a little punitive, but I would put some witnesses see that they chase down enemies that are running and fleeing, surrendering, and they see these people like cutting them down, and introduce a little bit of a reputation and be like, whoa,
Yeah,
whoa, we don't mess with you. Like, what do you mean? Like, well, last week, like you just like slaughtered those bandits. Like they literally like gave you their weapons and ran away, and you just stabbed them in the back. Like, we don't want
yeah,
to do business here. Just please leave town. Like, start having those kinds of interactions, because like I find that if you treat the world like it's real, some people don't like that. Like,
that's
that type of murder hoboism is like,
Yeah,
that's
I
a
don't know.
very good point. Yeah,
I think
yeah. Give them
reputation.
consequences. Yeah, reputation.
The other thing is, it might be worthwhile to talk to them, because I've had players who do this because they're afraid that if the monster's going to get away, they're going to find them again and track them down and get them, or they're going to come get them in their sleep, or if they take prisoner and let them go, that they're going to rat them out. And so, like, it might just be worth having a metagame conversation saying, like, sometimes monsters going to run away. If they run away, you can treat them, you can give them the same thought you would slain enemies. Like, they are no longer a threat for the immediate time being,
Right.
and you scared them away. Like, what are they going to do? Take 5 minutes and come back? Like, uh, you scared them, and to let them know that, like, that there's potential reputation at stake if they're particularly bloodthirsty, and also, like, if they're ever in a situation where they need to run and they have a reputation for bloodthirstiness, then no one's going to show them quarter,
That's a good.
as opposed to taking them prisoner and holding them ransom or something like that. And when you like start introducing things like prisoner exchange and ransom, and treating your enemies a certain way, not always to the death, like, you open up the door for more social intrigue and faction play, because now you can have, like, well, we used to be enemies, now we're allies kind of
Mm-hmm.
moments.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, you can't have an enemy of my enemy moment if you kill
If you
all
just
your
kill everybody,
enemies.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just
But they
And,
could be doing it preemptively. They think it might come back and bite them if they don't. So I would just let them know, like, hey, it's not gonna.
Yeah, and it's good to say that, because as a DM, when you're running through this, you may not consider that option. You're like, well, okay, they're chasing them down, they want to fight them and kill them. But then if now that you know this, because I hadn't thought of that at first, which I should have, but I didn't. Yeah, somebody's sitting there watching you, or a priest of the god who the paladin is, the god of all, or the follows, also is sitting there watching
Yeah.
and saying, "What are you doing, my son?" Stuff like that.
Is your
Yeah, that's
alignment
those
good or
are those
not?
are great.
Like,
yeah. I mean,
not
if
everybody
there's
plays
a
with alignment, but
yeah, if there's a cleric or a paladin in that party doing that, like, we used to have a
Oh,
player, like, the joke was, and he was a paladin dragon slayer, but like he's like, hey, this is my friend, and then just stabs him, like,
yeah,
because he basically did that in an adventure, and like we were just kind of sitting there like,
I don't think about anything.
how do you think that you're still a paladin? Like,
yeah, yeah.
Fun
Not for
times.
long. Not a paladin for long. Okay, so now let's talk about your amazingly successful Kickstarter.
All right,
oh,
All right,
let's do
Weird
it.
Wastelands. tell me about this. What is this Weird Wastelands?
Ooh, all right. So Weird Wastelands is a toolkit book that is for DMs who want to run their games in post-apocalyptic wastelands of a highly magical nature. This is as much inspired by Dark Sun as it is Eberron's Mournland. Um, to me, they're equally as sort of compelling as post-apocalyptic places. And where Dark Sun goes the sword and sandals, bone, stone, and obsidian route, Weird Wastelands goes the Gonzo magic and post-apocalyptic weirdness route. So the idea is that the places that we'll have in there and the tools that we'll provide for dungeon masters are to facilitate a very what you might call overclocked fifth edition experience, where we give the players things that might seem on paper a bit much or excessive, but they might need them, and they're equally as dangerous things out there in the wastelands that balance out that extra power that they have. I find it's a very engaging way to play by telling players you can go wherever you want. We made this sandbox. There's no precious lore to worry about. There's no balance. If this settlement gets wiped off the map, it's post-apocalypse. There's sort of a narrative reason for all of the lawlessness and everything. It's what you want to make of it. You want to make this a paradise. It's in your hands. It's dangerous, but you have the freedom to shape and change this place and remake it. And we want to facilitate those kinds of games with Weird Wastelands.
Yeah, I was reading some of the talking points on it, and you've got, is this a setting book? Is it an adventure book? And both of those are no, basically. I mean, you're providing information for the DMs to basically use. You say you've got adventure hooks for the locations and NPCs, factions, treasure suggestions, possible encounters. So
Mhm.
you're basically, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're providing the DM a setting or a very small setting or a location. You're extrapolating that and saying this is what's going on in this area, these are the dangers, these are what you might, and they build off
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so similar to the encounter tables that Pruitt was talking about earlier, like if you had nothing else in just those tables and you ran a game based off of them, you would have a game that's set in this particular environment with these particular creatures and threats. And so there's an implied setting in Weird Wastelands through the encounter tables and the hazards and the locations and things that the players can discover and the like. But we're leaving big gaps for DMs to fill themselves so that if they just need like a weird desert because that's where they're going this session,
Mhm.
and they know their players aren't super into resource management and scarcity and things like that, they can probably only tolerate it for a session or two, but those would be high octane, really high energy sessions. Then they can use it without having to disentangle it or worry too much about how it fits into their world. Or if they want to create a whole campaign world out of this stuff, there'll be enough of it that they can use the set pieces and then the generators that will include for the rest.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
really cool because you've got the. I'm sorry, Pruitt. Go ahead.
I was just gonna just kind of say that it's very in the vein of like the 3.5 like Storm Rack,
Mm.
Frostburn, Sandstorm books, where it gives you all the tools you need, and like just fill in the names, and there you go.
Yeah, I think a toolbox for DMs is great because yeah, you've got this. Say, like you said, they want to go to a desert, and so then you've got this location with the factions and NPCs and that type of thing. It's not lore heavy, right?
Not really. No, there's enough. If it, what I here's the thing that I always bugs me in published adventures when there's this NPC, there's this place, there's whatever, and there's no name, there's no quick just who is this, just enough to riff off of or satisfy the players. So we wanted to give enough. We don't want to leave you hanging with like, I don't know who this person's name is or why this thing's here. But it's little snippets, just like little bits of it that suggest certain things about the pre fall civilization that was here. It suggests what events might have occurred since then,
Right, because
but
you're in a
it's not like,
post-apocalyptic. Yeah.
yeah. And in the vein of post apocalypse, it's like totally incomplete because nobody knows.
Yeah.
It's they lost
Right.
all that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's cool. I like that. And then one of the cool things I noticed in the book is you've got this WebDM wisdom section, which basically, why don't you tell us what that is? And this, I'm sorry,
That's
real quick. This is on the like side pages. So these are like
okay.
sidebars within the pages. So if you've got a monster, um, you get the tactics and you've got the monster description, but then on the side they've got this little box that says WebDM wisdom, and it may be how to run the monster or more information on that.
Yeah, so like I always like design notes from game designers. It's always helpful to me to make when I'm making rulings, like where's their head at? What's like the intent of this thing? And we're probably going to include a lot of things that your average fifth edition group maybe hasn't seen in a published adventure before. It might be weird. It might seem unfair. One of the effects in there is like take 30 dice of damage in an hour. And until then, you can trickle that out sort of slowly over little drips and drabs and heal up and the like, or all at once, whatever. But it's not a standard effect that you might have seen before. And so we want to have a space that is sort of our way to communicate directly to the players and the GMs to tell them what our intent is, to offer them some insight into why we chose, made the decisions that we did, or just like we think this is cool, or here's how we would use it, um, and to kind of separate it out so that it's not intruding on the text as you're reading it. But if you want it and you want that insight or that maybe inspiration, that it's there for you. And then outside of those will be things like see page such and such for this rule that we mentioned earlier, so that's sort of cross-referenced with itself.
Mhm. As a DM, I like that. As a designer, I like it also because, designing adventures and trying to um, put your thoughts into the language of D&D can be just difficult sometimes. So I think having
Yeah,
that sidebar there or that little text box just to kind of say, well, this is my idea here. If it doesn't come across
yeah,
right, this is what I'm looking for. So
right, right.
yeah. So what else can you tell me about this book? This cool, weird Wastelands book.
Yeah. So one of the things that was really important to us to include is to like provide structure for exploration based games and a way for DMs to frame meaningful moments of play where there's a real choice and consequences of it. Fifth edition does a lot to kind of undermine those moments. I think it comes from a spirit of resource tracking can be tedious,
Hmm.
and in many ways the parts of the gameplay of exploration gameplay, like tracking how many rations you have and how far you travel in a day. Like it's important for grounding the game, but it also slows things down and isn't particularly enjoyable if it's not run like really well. So we want to like take the spirit of resource management and of tracking those things and reimagine them and provide you means to like these aren't just moments where you're just rolling a die. Something could happen. We could be zooming in on this moment, and this might be a moment that your character gets lost and alone in the wilderness by themselves, separated from the party, and they have to find each other again. Or they thought they were out foraging for food, and it turns out there's an animal following them that they just realize, or they've run into a patch of bad terrain. Like moments in a wilderness adventure that are worth zooming in on because something of consequence might happen. And currently, DMs are really kind of left unsupported in when those happen, how they happen, what the consequences are. And so we want to provide like just a big bag of fear, like use these pieces to build the kind of game you want. And then provide them with a simple structure if they don't want to come up with one on their own.
That's great. So Pruitt, are there new monsters in this thing?
Oh yeah, we're coming up with quite a few. We've outlined quite a bit. There's of course the magic ore that's in the promo, but yeah, there will be definitely an array of monsters for the Weird Wasteland to try to kill you with. But
New
also like
treasures?
oh yeah, there's always treasures, and one thing that we're really trying to put in here is that the monsters have resources, not just like the typical like, oh, I skin them and make some armor, or I cut a horn off and carve it into a dagger. Like no, like this is a weird wasteland that's been altered, and so everything in it has been altered. Like even if you just look at the magic cord, like just from eating magic, it has changed. So like how have other things changed, and what effects happened if you were to, I don't know, just eat a certain part of certain monsters? Like, would you die? Would you get a boon or a power for a certain time or permanently? Like,
Mhm.
these are the things. Like, there's a reason that you want to go out and try to find this stuff, because this is like the monsters are the resource because they're out there, and like so have fun with it.
Yeah, the thing I'm trying to keep in mind is I never want it to be boring. It's something, you might come across a hazard or a monster, and you might be like, I don't like this. This is like, this is bad, but it's not boring. And to put some element of choice, even in a dire moment, in the player's hands of how they handle that moment, to not like take control away from their character, their ability to respond away from them. A lot of cool things in D&D, but some of the more frustrating ones are like the big flashy stuff is like, well, your character's paralyzed and you can't do anything, and it's also nothing's going to happen to you during that time. Like if I'm going to paralyze you, I'm also going to give you visions so that you can learn something. Or if you're going to be, at risk of losing a character through, massive damage, that there's some way you can control that or mitigate it, or at the very least, like blow yourself up in front of a bunch of enemies to take them out or something. Like that you're not going to go out like a chump and it's not going to be boring.
And I'm looking at the Kickstarter page right now, and I think it's awesome that you have a collector's box. And that collector's box is actually selling very well or being backed very well. There are only, what was it?
Yeah, how many?
Oh wait, is it over? It says no longer available.
Yeah. I don't know that we're going to get any more.
I think we went through a couple of groups of that.
This is why others are helping us with managing the Kickstarter, because I surely would forget.
Well, it's cool because it comes with a Wasteland flask.
Yeah.
Oh, in the second round?
Oh, yeah,
okay.
Second round.
Thank you.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah, it comes with a Wasteland flask, a dice satchel, Wasteland dice, and all this other cool stuff. The cool box, and the deluxe print version, and I just think that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
yeah.
A flask for water, right?
A flask for water.
I mean, I would think that just even a wee bit of the good stuff is worth its weight in gold out in the Wastelands. Like,
right?
Probably. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
So for anybody watching or listening, if you don't have the link, if you just Google Weird Wastelands, I think that'll pop up. And if you're also on Kickstarter, just do a search for Weird Wastelands, and you'll find their page. Now they're at 225,000. Fantastic funding. 2,911 backers. Amazing.
Yeah.
And it says Worlds of WebDM Weird Wastelands. Tell me what that means.
Well, I mean, it's that we wanted to be not subtle, but not subtle at all. I mean, it is the first word in the title, worlds, plural. So, longtime viewers would know that Jim ran The Land Between Two Rivers and I ran Starbound Bound. And, so we have a stretch goal currently up that will do a preview of our next book, which is tentatively titled Sea of Stars. And so,
that's a great title, by the way. Sea of Stars.
Yeah, alliteration is an amazing thing.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, it's doing amazing. I think everybody needs to go check this out. I've backed it, and
thank you.
I don't need to wish you good luck with it because you've already had great success. So, congratulations there. As part of being on the show, I do donate to charity for the attendees, and so each of you have chosen the same charity. It's the Foundation Community of Austin. And so each of you, I'll donate $20 for each of you to that. So they'll get a $40 donation.
Thank you.
I'll send you receipts for that soon. And is there anything else you wanted to mention about either your show, the Kickstarter, or anything like that?
Well, the only we have announced what's coming out on Monday, right? Yeah, that's been in social media.
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the only thing I would say is on Monday we are going to release the promo of the first 5 levels of the Scion.
Oh, that's another thing I was going to mention.
It is based off of Dark Sun, and we just think that there should be some, if it's some science fantasy, which this very much is, there should be some psionics in there. So
yeah,
that's very proud of that.
I forgot to mention that. Yep, Scion class, awesome, and subclasses too, right?
Yes, there are 3. We're calling them mental modalities.
Yes.
DMs, I don't think you'll be disappointed if you pick this up, DMs. So if you're
there's stuff for DMs and players. Despite our talk, there is subclasses and spells and variant class features, things like that. Yeah,
perfect.
Lots of stuff for players too.
Well, again, if you haven't watched their show, go check it out. WebDM, Google it, check out their show. I think you'll pick up some great tips. Jim Davis, Jonathan Pruitt, thank you for being on the show. I've had a great time talking to you two. We'll have to have you on again sometime.
Awesome.
Pleasure.
Probably when your next Kickstarter comes out, whenever that is.
Yeah, let's do
May
it.
have.
And again, where can we find you on social media, Jim?
You can find me at the real Jim Davis over on Twitter, and yeah, that's where I'm at.
And Jonathan Pruitt.
You can find me right here at JPro Inc. over on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. I'm around.
Awesome. And I am Jeff Stevens. You can find me at my website, jeffstevensgames.com. You can find my adventures from the Potbelly Kobold on Amazon and DriveThruRPG. And I am on Twitter at jcorvinstevens. Remember, don't forget to subscribe and follow Jenny Loveday's Twitch channel because she is the one making this possible for us all. And if you are listening, or just leave a review, let people know about this show because I want to share all this with people. So thank you both for being on the show. It's been a great time.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Everyone else, until next time, may your roles be successful or unsuccessful, whichever you want them to be. Take care.